This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And today I have on an author. Her name is Pat Schoeler. Did I get that right?
Schoeler.
Okay. Yep. As I tell everybody, I am terrible with names. And my parents must have tattooed my name on my eyes so I wouldn't forget it, because it's horrible for me. But I've asked Pat to be with us regarding her writing, but specifically, you wrote about 9/11 and your experience of 9/11. Can you give us a little bit of background? Like, weren't there enough books written about 9/11, enough stories, or will we never have enough?
Yes and yes, actually. I'm in West Orange, New Jersey, which is about 8.5 miles away from New York City, the Twin Towers. There's a location here called Eagle Rock Reservation that is an unobstructed view from here to the skyline in New York City.
Wow.
So, it's personal on many levels. But, do you want me to say how it started?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. It was a beautiful September morning, so everybody was going about their business. I personally was sitting here having a cup of coffee with the TV on when the news broke in to say that there was an accident at the World Trade Center, that a plane had flown into it. I think when I spoke with other people, we kind of had the feeling that it might have been a small plane, that there was an accident, because there are a lot of airports nearby. But when they started televising it and you saw it was an airliner, it was like, oh my God. And then another plane went into the other tower. And I'm getting the goosebumps again now. Everything became surreal at that point.
Right.
Just too hard to digest. My partner was out playing golf at the time. So when they came home, like most of us, we went over to the reservation to see what was happening, because everybody knows that spot.
Right.
And as I've said before, even though we didn't know everybody that was there, we kind of became instant friends or family, because we were all experiencing the same horror.
Right.
And it was just mind-boggling to believe that that's happening here,
Well, I mean, it happens other places. That's, what we believe, it's never going to happen to us. And then when it does, it's like, wait a second. I thought we were bigger, better, more equipped. But the reality of it is, it was no accident. It was something that was planned. And there still are a lot of people out there who believe that it didn't happen. The same way they say the Holocaust didn't happen. It's like, it's not a story. We didn't make it up. It wasn't a movie that was being filmed. I know for myself, when I first saw it, I saw the second plane. I had turned on the news, heard about the first plane. All of a sudden, I saw the second plane. And all I could think about was my oldest son was practicing law in New York, not far from the Trade Center. And he had mentioned many times that he went to his clients that were in the Trade Center. And my first reaction was, oh my God, where is he? Luckily that morning, he overslept. And he turned on the news as he was getting dressed and heard about the towers. And he had a breakfast meeting that was scheduled that he slept through. I mean, talk about like how wonderful I felt during this tragic time.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
I can't imagine seeing it on TV was horrific, but to be standing and seeing something really literally so close to you.
Yeah.
And they say that the smell from the buildings just wafted for miles and miles. So you said you became family, friends, because you all had something in common. And that was probably, how would you describe that?
It was very emotional on a level that I don't think I ever experienced, because the crowd of us that was over there, like I said, we didn't know each other, but whoever was standing next to you would kind of tell their story. But immediately people started putting up posters. Have you seen such and so? Because, like you, they had family, friends that worked in New York City. And at that point, we knew it was the towers, but what else was affected? Because they showed other buildings going down also.
Well,
Mhm.
and people were getting trampled as they were trying to run away as
Yes,
well. And there were other people trying to run towards those buildings because they knew of somebody who was there. And so it was pure chaos because it's not something that you can plan for. So that day you stood there, what happened after that day? Because I know for myself, I was very numb just knowing that my son really was a true survivor.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
and yet I was glued to my TV for days because I wanted somehow to get a happy ending, which for some people there were survivors that, you know, did make it out. But even those survivors had said they lost so much behind
yes,
them. So
yes.
what happened after that first day? How can you describe how people reacted, at least in your circle?
Well, I kind of jumped ahead of myself because, like when I said my partner was out golfing,
Yeah.
but our neighbors, we all kind of met in the street too, to talk about what was happening and our disbelief. Um, the feeling we all had was disbelief. Uh, Listening to your story, though, I have heard of that, and God bless you that that happened. In fact, my partner's nephew was supposed to be over there also, but was coming over from England. I mean, they were from here, but there was always something that stopped the person from going. And conversely, there you hear stories of people that went in that shouldn't have been there, that took place for someone else saying, okay, I'll cover for you today. And they
Right.
went in, or I'll meet my friend for lunch. There were so many different stories. Um, but what happening to get me to write it, that's how I process. And I've learned that over the years. People tell me I'm empathetic, that other people's stories become mine. And years ago, I started journaling, like writing things down. And then all of a sudden, it started to rhyme. I can't tell you how or why, but it was like, whoa, it's just kind of what happened. Um, so the first poem I wrote was because of what I saw on the news that day. And I just kept writing what I saw. And as what my partner said at the end when I was done, like a couple of months later, so we've got to share these poems because not only, like you said, history books write what happens. I wrote them, I dated it as I saw it. Um, these are facts, but they're feelings that I'm sharing, like you and I are talking right now, how you shared your story. So yes, it is factual, but it's from a human person's, take on it.
Well, and to me, that is more authentic than, somebody just putting all the data out there. I mean, the data is good, but it is what we all went through. I remember on that fateful day, as soon as I realized that my son was safe, he has a younger brother who was in middle school at the time. And I turned to my husband and I said, we've got to go to the middle school. I want to tell him before, he starts worrying and wondering. And we drove over to the middle school. At first, the principal didn't want us to bring him out because the class had not been told yet. And she was afraid that if we told them and they went back to class, that he was going to upset everybody. And I said, well, when do you plan on telling the children? You're not going to ignore it all day long. And if you tell them at 3:00 when they're leaving, they're going to be in a panic. So don't you think there's a learning lesson here? And she looked at me and she said, no, we're going to do it our way. I said, well, then I'm going to take him home. I'm going to let him know that, I'm going to pretend like he has a doctor appointment, just get him out of the classroom. And I said, we'll take him home and we'll tell him. And I'm so glad I did that because he needed the reassurance. He needed to hear his brother's voice. In the meantime, I got a phone call from my father and he said, did you know that your brother was in New York last night? And I thought he was going to tell me terrible news. And he goes, he's safe. But they were recording a concert. I think it was in Battery Park, which isn't very far from there. And they started tearing down around 7 a.m. They got out of the area within 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
And my brother lives in upstate New York, but he's a music producer. But I didn't think, that he would be down there. And so we talked with my younger son about the things we must be grateful for. But it doesn't mean it can, if this happens again, we're also going to be safe. We just have to remind people that this was a tragedy and it can't happen again. We have to stop it. So in your book, you wrote poetry to identify your thoughts and feelings.
Yes. And originally, as I said, we spoke about, possibly doing something with it. But what we actually did was went to a local publisher or printing place and had books made up like for our nieces and nephews who were young, figuring, okay, this is something for them, never realizing that I was going to do what I was going to do. But my niece was pregnant at the time, and my great niece was born on November 1st, 2011. I'm getting nervous now.
It's okay.
November 1st in 2001. So she was born a couple of months after this happened. So, like I said, we published it. We gave it out to our family and friends. But we didn't do anything with it actually until the 10th anniversary, where I went with a publisher and put it out. But it was originally for just what you said. The kids don't know. They just don't get it. The other ones were still young. So.
And how wonderful that a publisher saw the value in the writing. And that
I self-published, actually.
Well,
so.
But yeah. Even so, it's self-publishing is not easy. And I know so many people out there that, I'm going to write a book. Okay. And then what are you going to do?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to go find a publisher. Well, good luck.
Lots of luck.
We don't make a lot of money on the books that we write. However, the book is a vehicle. It's a vehicle for either speaking engagements or a vehicle just for other people to know the story in the perspective. And I think that is really important because we can look at the newsreels all we want, but what did you see? What did you feel? And this was, 20 years ago, that actually a little over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, that
22
this
years ago,
happened.
yeah.
And our life has gotten much different since then.
Yes.
And I'm sure as somebody who, has these emotional feelings, you probably have watched the last, 20 plus years differently than you did prior to 9/11.
I have. And if I could just add the reservation that I was telling you about where we all gathered,
Yeah.
it is now a actual monument there. Our county exec, Joseph DiVincenzo, he recognized what this place was. Because like I said, later on, everybody was putting signs up, flags, homes, and he actually made it into this phenomenal monument to the 9/11. So each year on September 11th, we have a ceremony. My proudest part is I wrote a poem about this. He liked it so much that it's now on a plaque mounted at this, which to me is my greatest accomplishment, I guess. But so every year, every September 11th, everybody gets together. It's a huge ceremony. We're never going to forget. We just aren't. And it's very moving.
I'm sure it is. Many of us don't have that in our neighborhoods, and you're talking to me about a community that is strong, and how wonderful that you have that. Because typically, when we think of the East Coast, we think of New York City and New Jersey just across the way. We think, this is all big city living and, everybody is too busy for each other. But this incident, as you said, brought people together, people that we
Yes.
didn't know, people who we never would have made friends with because they didn't come into the circles we were in. But the circles all sort of converged. And now that you
Yes.
do this every year, you're meeting
Yeah.
more and more people that are coming into the circle, and that circle is just getting bigger. And it's sad that this had to happen to make that happen.
Yes. And the beautiful part is, if I have to say beautiful, maybe, and also comforting, every person's name is listed on this wall. Every single person's name, their age, and where they came from, because not everybody was recovered.
Right.
There's no place for people to go. So anytime you go over there, any time of the year, it's just so reverent. It's just so, it's kept impeccably clean. People go, it's just so respectful. And you see them going to the wall looking for names, because it is a place to come to. Because it's true, not everybody, you can't go to a cemetery if somebody wasn't
Exactly.
recovered, is the only way to put it,
Now, I'm assuming that you didn't have anybody who was in this during 9/11.
Right.
You probably knew people that could have been in that area, but luckily were not. So writing this book is only one of 3 that you've written. Okay. Tell me about, as you've written your books, what's the catalyst for getting you to say, hey, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to start writing?
After this book, like you were saying, I didn't know anybody personally, but if I could just interject something. because my nephew is a firefighter here at Cranford. And he would relay a story to me as a firefighter losing his brothers, even though he didn't know them. So I ended up writing a poem that I put in the book that has since been put in firehouses to offer comfort to them. I just wanted to interject that,
Oh
if that's
no,
okay.
I love that. And
Yeah,
there is a camaraderie amongst firefighters and
yes.
policemen. They do come together, and it's it's phenomenal. We one of our best friends was a volunteer fireman, and um he was always there for anybody in the community. And he always like knew ahead, that, hey, I think this neighbor needs something. And he and his wife would show up and, you know, bring you a basket of goodies or just sit on your porch and talk to you. Uh, they are a special breed. And
They are. That's how my nephew Andy is. He was a firefighter at the time, but he literally just retired as a battalion chief.
oh wow.
But he had the look, the pain on his face was like, it just really moved me. And
Absolutely.
the story he told me that ended up in this book was about how the firemen wear beepers on their uniforms, that if they are still, these go off. The beepers go off so that they can be found. Just the
Interesting.
idea of how many of these beepers must have been going off, it just, it prompted this poem. It just,
Do
so
you have the
that's
po-
how it became. I'm
do you
sorry.
have the poem that you can read to us?
I actually do, if you want me to.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. The sound of the beepers, only the fireman knows, a part of his equipment wherever he goes. A beeping sound, the flashing light, enabling them to be found day or night. On September 11th, what a mournful sound, so many beepers activated from under the ground. The pain and frustration these firemen must have felt. This is more destruction than any of us have ever been dealt. In their hearts, they knew it was already too late. There is no way to understand the hands of fate. Please just remember all the lives that you did save from this monster that is totally depraved. Because of you, they live to face another day, and no words are adequate to thank you, they would say. Your brothers need you to carry on in their honor too, because they are your brothers. That's exactly what you'll do. They will never be forgotten by family or friends. They may be out of sight, but it's not where it ends. They'll live on in the memory of those they've touched, a part of all who love them so much. That's
Wow.
the
No, I'm glad that you shared that because it's something that our listeners um, need to understand about, those first responders who are there, when we need them the most. And yet they are just as human as we are. And they leave behind loving families and friends because this is their task in life. And congratulations to your nephew for, working in the field for the years that he did. And I'm sure it probably made his community feel safe knowing that he and his brothers and sisters now
yes,
were
yes,
were protecting them. So this was your first book, correct?
yes, yes.
So what was your second book about?
Okay. My second book is called Reflections on Life. I worked in the corporate world for 34 years. So you have a lot of experiences. Like I said, I'm very empathetic. So if something happens to someone else, so everything that's in my book is all the aspects of life, good, bad, indifferent, funny. Uh, and I would just write them and keep them. And then again, when my partner and I were talking about it, it's like, well, why don't we do something with it? Even my sister was saying, well, Pat, what good are they going to do you at home in your book? Why don't, I mean, in your home?
Yep.
Why don't you just share it? So it was a huge job because I had so many about everything. So we sat down and picked out what we thought would be interesting and just, again, self-published another book to put out there. And like I said, this is everything in life. My family and friends that have gotten this book say they keep it by their bedside because it's not a book that you sit down like a novel and
Right.
read from beginning to end, but you go through it and you look at the titles and you go, oh, and you start reading it. And I'm just told they're so relatable. It's like, oh yeah, that happened to me, or I feel like that. So again, I wrote that.
And that's one of the reasons we do this podcast. It's very similar to what you're putting together in that book. We all have a story to tell. And our stories can be relatable to so many people, even if we are totally different. And that's one of the things I have found as I've had my guests on. In fact, listening to you and the fact that you've been doing this writing for yourself for so many years. My father wrote, not journals, but he wrote poetry all the time for everybody's event in life, whether it's a happy or sad event. If he noticed something about somebody, he wrote it down and it became a poem. And
perfect.
I have loose leaves filled of all this. And when my mother passed away and I became the keeper of it, my first reaction was, what do I do with this? But to me, it's like a Bible. I don't want to throw it away. And we too have been talking about, you know what, let's sort through it. Let's find, what we think are the top ones and, self-publish it. Because again, they're all about humanity and individual feelings. And I love that you were seeing that because I know working in the corporate world can discolor what we're seeing.
Yes.
But you were hearing the voices of the people that you knew that were working in, what they were going through.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And I can relate to what you're saying about your dad. So if you can self-publish, that would be great, But I don't have any children of my own, but I have my nieces and nephews that I'm very close to, and I call them my kids.
Sure.
But they call me Dial-A-Poem because if they need something, they go, ask Aunt Pat, she'll write it. I love that.
And tell me about book 3.
Book 3 is a tough one because it's called Grief Hurts. And that was after my partner passed away in 2019. So that was really tough to get my feelings out. Grief is universal. It truly is. No matter who you've lost, it's just universal. We all know the pain, the thoughts that go through our head, and you can't always talk to people about it. I mean, you want to, but they just don't get it, or it's very hard. What happened is I did join a grief group, and I started sharing some of them with them. And they were saying, but you're writing what we're feeling. We just don't know how to say it. So they encouraged me to put it out there. I thought really long and hard about doing it because it's not an easy read. It's just raw emotion. But again, it's universal. And with any of my books, if I can help just one person to say, wow, I feel like that too, that your feelings are validated. That's really all I'm looking for.
Well, your third book really hits my heart, and I will tell you why. almost 7 years ago, my mother was doing very well. She was living in an independent living apartment. She had some support services, but for the most part, she was very independent. And on August 2nd of 2016, my brother got a call saying, "We believe your mother had a stroke. We've taken her to the hospital. We think you should let your brother and sister know. And whoever can get up to Michigan the quickest should get there." Well, I'm the closest. So I got a phone call from my brother and he told me, and I said, "Well, is she, alert? He had they didn't give him any information." So I gathered up my husband and my son and we drove up to Michigan, and I walk into her hospital room and she's sitting up. The TV is on. Well, what they didn't tell us was that her stroke took away her eyesight, but she didn't know it.
Oh.
So she thought she was watching the TV. When somebody came in, she sensed they were there, but she, said that she could see them. But the doctor knew she couldn't, because when he did the eye exam, her eyes didn't move.
Wow.
So there I was, and we were being told by the doctor that this stroke was bigger than it looks right now, because she was gabbing with us, telling us stories and everything. He said, "So number one, you cannot tell your mother she's blind, because she will not understand it, and it's would only upset her." That was the hardest burden on all of us.
Wow.
But what happened was, when she was released, according to Michigan law, you either have to go to a rehab or or go home and have somebody take care of you. And so my brother and I decided she was going to go back to her apartment. We were going to stay with her. We had no idea how long, maybe a week, a month, a year. So we were both working independently, but I left my husband and son at home. And the point of this is that my grief started from the moment I heard that she had the stroke.
Exactly.
But
Yes.
I wasn't really dealing with it because I was taking care of mom. And my husband and son kept telling me they missed me. They understood why I was there, but they missed me. They came to visit me a couple of times, but then I was feeling like I was cheating my family. I was working from her apartment, but even the moments that I left her bedside to go do a podcast, I was feeling guilty, which is part of grief. So I started talking about grief in many of my podcasts. Last year, we started a podcast with 4 grief coaches. And just a few things you were saying about it. Nobody understands it. We can guide each other through it, but we can't asking you how you're feeling. That's not what you want to ask. If somebody wants to tell you how they're feeling, you need to listen and don't judge. And how soon are you going to get over it? In fact, I've had people say to me, "Karen, your mother has been gone 6.5 years. When are you going to get over it?" Never going to get over it. And I
Deadly
see
question.
Yeah. And you see it different every day. At least I do. There are some days that I'll be driving down the street and I'll think, I need to call mom. And there are other days that I just look up into the sunshine and I talk to mom. But that's part of grieving. That's part of loving.
Yes. Yep.
So I can imagine your book, number 3 is a difficult one, but I think it's important for all of us to read it, to understand that grief is real and we're not going to get out of this world without
No,
experiencing it.
no, because if you love, at some point you're going to feel grief, but it's worth the love. I wouldn't change a thing. But something you said is very true. When you first heard about your mom, that's when your grieving started. And it was true. At the first diagnosis of cancer, that's when your world changes. That's when your grieving starts, but you don't put a label on it, but truly that's when it starts. Because your life
Absolutely.
changes forever. But I think I agree with you. The worst thing you can say to someone is, when are you going to get over it? You never get over it.
No.
You know, you learn how to live around it, through it, you carry it. I don't even know how to say it.
Well,
And
but you're saying it right. Yeah.
okay. Because May 3rd, it's going to be 4 years, and it's not any easier now, you know?
The loss of anyone or anything special to us is something that we all grieve about. When I had to leave my corporate job, I loved what I was doing, but I hated the culture. And I knew I had to get out because I was coming home and I was a raving maniac. I was depressed and I don't understand why I can't do the things I'm doing because I'm successful at it, but the culture says that's not the way we do it. But you're getting the same results, but you don't like the way I'm doing it. And I felt I just can't do this anymore. And when I walked away from it, probably the first year, I cried internally all the time. Why couldn't I have made it work? Why couldn't I be out there helping my students? And all these whys. And I finally said, you know what? You're doing it through podcasting. You've got to let it go. And have I let it go? Not 100%, because it's part of who I was.
Yeah.
And it's led me to who I am today.
Isn't that the truth? Every life experience, when you look back on it, has led us to where you and I are right now, having this conversation. And I feel like I've known you forever and we just met. But I mean, it's our life experience that has brought us to where we are.
And you had the
Yeah.
choices to write or not to write. You may have felt compelled to do your writing, but you also had a choice. Hey, I don't want to put all these feelings out on paper. But there was something inside of you that said, yeah, I want to do this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it in the future.
No, I
And
didn't.
probably in the beginning, it didn't even matter what you did with it. It was just,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this.
And
So,
it's funny because I always had to have, well, at the time, a paper and pencil, because if it came into my mind, if I didn't write it down right then and there, it was gone. I couldn't say I'll write it when I get home. I couldn't. I just, as a quickie, if it's okay. Years ago, we were at a funeral for a friend, and something the priest had said, just like, whoa. We got to the car, and I said, please don't say anything. And I took out my paper and pencil, and his poem came out. Like, I don't know where it's coming from either. I just don't, but it happens.
well, and people who have the talent to put words together, whether it be in poetry or song or any kind of writing, that's typically what I've learned happens. They see something, they hear something, all of a sudden they feel something in their body, and they have to tell you, leave me alone, because you go off and write it. And my youngest son did that one day. he's on the autism spectrum, very high functioning, and he was just having a rough day, and he was annoying his dad and I in the car, and it turned into an argument, and we started arguing about nothing that had anything to do with his feelings. We got home and he said to me, "Don't talk to me." He ran up the stairs and slammed his bedroom door shut. About a half hour later, he came out and he said, "Read this." And I read it. And I looked at him and the tears, I said, "This is my song." And it was about not understanding. You don't understand me. You see me as, the bad guy. And that's how I was feeling with him. Every time I tried to lead you or correct you with something, I become the bad guy. And who am I? He put the whole thing down. He sent it to his uncle, who's a music producer. He said, "Help me with this." And he has it out on YouTube, and it's like, he doesn't know what he really wants to do with it, but those who hear it start to realize that, hey, I'm a person. And yes, I can have meltdowns because we all do to some degree, but that doesn't make me any the less of your equal. And,
Wow.
that talent is raw. And I'm so grateful for people like you, my dad, my son, others out there who come up with these ideas, and you create them for all of us to hear.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Because it's as you said, as I write them, I didn't know what I was going to do with them. So thank you for saying that.
So your books are available on Amazon, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we'll put a link in there so people can get out and read the books. I'm also going to talk to my grief podcast, and I'd love to have you on as a guest because, sometimes hearing it from the individual who's experienced it and is going to continue to experience the grief, but it takes on a different picture as time goes on. Doesn't make it any less, doesn't make it any more, but it's about time that we start accepting that it is what it is, and let's be kind.
I would like that very much. I thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to send this podcast on to them individually as well. This will be posted by tomorrow, and I will send you the links. And
Thank
Pat, you have been wonderful. I thank you. I wish you lots of love and happiness in the days to come. All right.
Karen, thank you so much. It's a delight. And I really do feel like I've known you. So.
Yeah, I do too. Maybe I'll get to New Jersey soon. That would be great.
Where are you actually?
Well, we're actually in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
And through podcasting, I have met so many people from New Jersey that I keep telling my husband, we have to take a road trip. And he looks at me like, could you think of some place other than the East Coast? It's like, no, I think it would be a great idea. But we won't come in the winter. I promise you that much.
Although we've had a good winter this year.
Yeah, so have we. But again, thank you, Pat, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Sure. Have a great day.
You too.